Are you deaf or just lost? This seating is for distinguished visitors and active duty personnel on orders, not for drifters. The voice was sharp, a polished weapon designed to cut, and it sliced through the low hum of the Yokota Air Base passenger terminal. Colonel Michael Hayes stood with his hands on his hips. His perfectly pressed flight suit a stark contrast to the man he was addressing. The man in question was old, seated on one of the plush chairs near the space travel desk. His clothes were clean but worn, a faded denim jacket and gray slacks that had seen better decades. A simple worn canvas bag rested at his feet. He looked up, his eyes a pale, watery blue, but they held a calmness that seemed to absorb the colonel's hostility without reflecting any of it back. He didn't seem intimidated or even surprised. He simply looked tired, like a man who had traveled a very long way. Not just across an ocean, but across a lifetime. "I'm waiting for a flight," the old man said, his voice raspy but steady. Colonel Hayes let out a short, incredulous laugh. "A flight with what?" "A museum pass. This is an active military installation. I need to see your identification and your travel orders." Now he snapped his fingers, an arrogant, dismissive gesture that made a nearby airman first-class flinch. The young airman had been about to offer the old man a bottle of water, but now he froze, caught in the gravitational pull of the colonel's rank. The old man sighed, a slow, weary sound, and reached into the pocket of his thin jacket. He produced a laminated ID card, its edges yellowed and soft with age. He handed it to the colonel. Hayes snatched it from his hand, his lip curling in disdain as he examined the faded photograph of a much younger man with the same steady eyes. "Samuel Mitchell," Hayes read aloud, his tone dripping with condescension. "Retired. Well, Mitchell, your retirement status doesn't grant you access to priority seating meant for deploying warfighters and senior leadership. You see these men and women around you." He gestured grandly to the uniformed personnel in the terminal. "They're the tip of the spear. You're a relic. Now, take your bag and move to the general waiting area over there with the rest of the civilians." Samuel Mitchell didn't move. He simply watched the colonel, his expression unreadable. The master sergeant at the desk said I could wait here. He stated quietly, not as a challenge, but as a simple fact. This only seemed to enrage Hayes further. His face flushed a dangerous shade of red. "Are you questioning my authority? I am a full bird colonel in the United States Air Force. I am the deputy commander of this wing. That master sergeant works for me, and I am telling you to move. Or is that concept too difficult for you to grasp?" The tension in the immediate area was palpable. People tried not to stare, but they couldn't help it. They buried their faces in phones and magazines. The silence punctuated only by the colonel's biting words. The humiliation was a public spectacle. The old man was being verbally flayed by an officer who outranked nearly everyone in the building. And for what? Sitting in the wrong chair. It was a gross abuse of power, but no one dared to intervene. The young airman who had wanted to help now looked at the floor, his cheeks burning with shame for his own inaction. Samuel Mitchell slowly, deliberately pushed himself to his feet. His joints audibly popped, and he placed a hand on his lower back, a silent testament to the years he carried. He was about to reach for his canvas bag when Colonel Hayes, not yet satisfied with his display of dominance, took another step forward. "You know, your generation is what's wrong with this country." Hayes sneered, his voice low enough to be just for Sam, but loud enough for those nearby to catch every venomous word. "Thinking the world owes you something for a bit of service you did 50 years ago. I've flown more combat hours in the last 5 years than you probably saw in your entire career. What did you even do? Push papers. Fix radios." Samuel Mitchell's calm finally seemed to crack, but not with anger. A flicker of something else. Pity, perhaps, crossed his face. He met the colonel's glare, and for the first time, a hint of steel entered his quiet voice. "I serve," he said simply. The two words, delivered with a profound and unshakable dignity, seemed to hang in the air, a shield against the colonel's barrage of insults. They were an undeniable truth, a bedrock of fact that Hayes's arrogance couldn't erode. But for Hayes, this quiet defiance was the final straw. It was insubordination from a man he had already dismissed as worthless. He felt his authority being subtly challenged, and he couldn't stand it. "You served." Hayes laughed again, a harsh, ugly sound. "Everyone served. That doesn't make you special. I bet you were a glorified mechanic. Come on, tell me. Let's hear the heroic story of your service. What unit were you in? What was your job?" He was goading him now, trying to force a confession of mediocrity to justify his own cruelty. The old man's gaze drifted past the colonel toward the massive window overlooking the flight line where a C-130 Hercules was being loaded. It was a look of deep, distant memory, as if he were seeing something else entirely. Phantoms of other aircraft, other places, other wars. "It was a long time ago," Sam said, his voice softening. "Details get hazy." This evasiveness was like blood in the water for a shark like Hayes. "Oh, I'm sure they do." Conveniently hazy. "Look, I've had enough of this. One last question, Old Timer. Every pilot, every operator worth his salt has a call sign. It's a badge of honor, so let's have it. What was your call sign? I'm sure it's a real knee slapper." "Puddle Jumper 1. Mailman 6. He leaned in, his face inches from Samuel's, a smug, triumphant grin spreading across his features. He had him pinned. There would be no impressive answer, just the mumbled, embarrassing confession of a nobody, and Hayes would have his victory. The terminal seemed to hold its breath. The young airman looked up, his heart pounding. The master sergeant behind the travel desk paused his typing, his eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. The entire room was an unwilling audience, waiting for the final crushing blow. Samuel Mitchell held the colonel's gaze. The weariness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a fire that seemed to burn away the years, revealing the man he once was. When he spoke, his voice was not loud, but it carried an impossible weight, a resonance that cut through every other sound in the vast terminal. It was the voice of command, of certainty, of history itself. "Hawk 8. The words dropped into the silence like a depth charge. For a moment, nothing happened. The name meant nothing to Colonel Hayes, who just scoffed, ready with another insult, but he never got to say it. Across the room, a grizzled master sergeant, a man with salt and pepper hair and a chest full of ribbons from his own long career, froze mid-sip from his coffee cup. The ceramic mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the polished floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden, profound quiet. His head snapped toward the old man, his eyes wide with disbelief. Then, with a dawning, electrifying reverence, a few older civilian contractors, men with military pasts etched into their faces, slowly lowered their newspapers. An Army Command Sergeant Major who was passing through stopped dead in his tracks, his head cocked as if he'd heard a ghost. The name echoed in the minds of the few who knew. It wasn't a name from the official histories. It was a name from the shadows, a piece of whispered lore. Colonel Hayes, oblivious, was about to continue his tirade. "Hawk, what is that supposed to impress me?" But his words were cut off. The master sergeant, who had dropped his coffee, was already moving. He strode past the colonel as if he weren't there, his back ramrod straight, his movements precise and filled with purpose. He stopped 2 feet in front of Samuel Mitchell, his body snapping to the most rigid, respectful position of attention Hayes had ever seen. He raised his hand in a salute so sharp it could have cut glass. "Sir," the master sergeant said, his voice thick with emotion. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez, 3rd Special Tactics Squadron. It is an honor, sir. A profound honor." Hayes was utterly bewildered. "What in God's name is the meaning of this, Master Sergeant?" "Stand down. You do not salute a retired civilian in this terminal." But Master Sergeant Rodriguez didn't even flicker. His eyes remained locked on Samuel Mitchell. "I'm not saluting a civilian, Colonel," Rodriguez said, his voice ringing with conviction. "I'm saluting a ghost." Just then, a new figure entered the scene, drawn by the commotion and the sound of the shattering mug. General David Walker, commander of United States Air Forces in Europe, was on his way to his aircraft, his 4-star rank parting the crowds like a ship's bow through water. His face was a thundercloud of annoyance. He hated public displays, especially from his senior officers. "Colonel Hayes, what is all this?" he boomed, his voice accustomed to filling hangars and commanding obedience. Hayes spun around, his face a mixture of shock and relief. "General, sir, my apologies. I was just dealing with a civilian who was refusing to." He stopped mid-sentence. The general was no longer looking at him. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, had found Samuel Mitchell. The thundercloud on the general's face vanished, instantly replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock, which then morphed into something Hayes could not comprehend on the face of a four-star general. Absolute reverence. General Walker did something that stunned every person in that terminal. He walked directly past the saluting Colonel Hayes without a glance. He walked past the still at attention master, Sergeant Rodriguez. He walked straight up to the old man in the faded denim jacket, stood before him, and rendered the sharpest, most heartfelt salute of his entire decorated career. "Sam," the general whispered, his voice cracking slightly. "My God, is it really you?" Samuel Mitchell, the man they called Hawk 8, slowly raised a hand and returned the salute with the practiced ease of a lifetime. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "It's been a while, David." The entire terminal was now utterly silent and still. Every eye was locked on the tableau. A four-star general saluting an old man who looked like he didn't have a penny to his name. Colonel Hayes stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, his world tilting on its axis. He couldn't process what he was seeing. General Walker held his salute for a long moment. Later that evening, after a hot meal and a long conversation with his old friend, General Walker, Sam was resting in the VIP quarters. There was a soft knock on the door. It was Colonel Hayes. His eyes were red-rimmed, his uniform immaculate, but seeming to hang on a diminished frame. He held his flight cap in his hands, twisting it nervously. "Sir," Hayes began, his voice barely a whisper. "May I have a word?" Sam gestured for him to enter. Hayes stepped inside, but remained standing stiffly by the door. "Sir, there are no words to properly express how ashamed I am. My behavior was inexcusable. It was arrogant, cruel, and dishonorable. I failed as an officer, and I failed as a human being. I can't take back what I said, but I can offer my most profound and sincere apology. I am sorry. I was wrong." He looked Sam directly in the eye, and for the first time, the old hero saw not a colonel, but a man, a flawed, humbled man facing the wreckage of his own character. Sam Mitchell studied him for a long moment. "We all have bad days, son,"